I'm recording.
You're recording? Okay. All right, so welcome to Accessibility 102. My name is Jason Garvey, and we're going to walk through three different principles dealing with accessibility in terms of online course development and just some general practices that you'll probably start to notice as you surf the internet and as you curate materials for your students. So I'm sure that, you know, as you've worked through some of these workshops, especially in the Accessibility 102, you've learned about UDL, Universal Design of Learning, and its principles that we design things for all learners. And so as we do that, we want to, have the three principles, which are having multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and or expression. And so when we do this, we are helping to reduce the barriers for learners with disabilities by ensuring we have accessible materials that help to minimize distractions. We have alternatives for the visual and the auditory elements of our courses. And we optimize access to tools and to assistive technologies as we develop our various materials. As we think about what happens when we fail to implement UDL principles, we start to build barriers for learners or distractions for learners, or they become, in some sense, threatened by the material. Not that it's an actual threat, but it's overwhelming for them, and it becomes a barrier in which they're, maybe they end up giving up, or they end up turning in something that's not quite right. And so as we think about some of these common barriers, we have to ask the question, what are the common barriers that are often constructed and perhaps even unknowingly constructed for our learners? And so as we think about some of those common barriers that we encounter, it could be uncaptioned videos, it could be there is unclear navigation, or there's a lack of alternative text for images or for tables. Perhaps there's poor color contrast in this as well. And as we think about that subcategory of poor, like color contrast, unclear navigation, we really get down to visual impairments as being one of the most primary and most frequently cited disability that impacts online course design. Now, there's other ones involved as well, and we'll talk about some of those things, such as motor impairment, auditory impairment, things like that. But as we think about visual impairments, this could include total blindness, this could include low vision, it could be some sort of like color blindness as well. So learners typically start to overcome this through the use of screen readers. So that allows the text to be read aloud and thus rendering the content more accessible. But then where our role comes in is making sure that we've designed things well so that screen readers can read that content. So how do we build our courses to assist students in a way that incorporates principles of universal design of learning? So the first principle that I want to talk about is Quality Matters Specific Review Standard 8.2. I love Quality Matters, but they are the very, very helpful resource. So 8.2, the rubric states that the course design facilitates readability. So what is readability? Does anyone have a definition for what readability might be? And this is where you can answer if you'd like to.
I have an answer.
Okay.
Course content is clearly organized and presented so that learners can easily read and interpret it.
Sounds like you're reading from the Quality Matters Handbook, which is awesome.
Oh, I would never.
You would never read from it. Oh no. So as we think about ensuring that course content is clearly organized and it's presented to learners so they can easily read and interpret it, let's look at 4 ways that we can create content for our learner to assist in that readability or maybe to not assist in that in in that in that realm of readability. So option one, um, people have difficulty reading this perhaps. We've got some curly text here, and it certainly looks very pretty. And I know some people have said that this was their favorite font when they were 18 or 19 years old. Um, but what would we say is wrong with this font?
It's just not easily read.
Yeah, yeah, it's a little messy.
Mhm.
It's certainly very very whimsical.
Mhm.
It makes me feel like I'm in some sort of fairy tale or things like that. But when we're presenting it to students, you really have to, as you're looking at it, really focus on it and to actually read what the definition says, actually read the words on the screen. Option two, what's wrong with this? Is anybody actually able to read what it says?
I can.
Yes, but it's a struggle.
Yeah, it's a struggle because we've highlighted the text and we've put a white font on yellow, which really hits the eyes in a really weird way. So as we think about designing things and writing out things, we got to make sure we've got right color consistency and right color contrast as well. Option three, maybe this is a little bit easier to read, but let's identify a couple things that maybe make it a little bit more difficult to read.
Well, just the change in type of font and font size.
Yep. Yeah, that can certainly throw people off. And then you've also got some text that's not quite centered, or it's indented a little bit more. Things are bold. There's not enough space between some of the words, or there's no spacing between the words. And so as we think about formatting our fonts, and as we think about ensuring readability for students, we have to think about how's our font size, what's our style, is there a consistency being used throughout the course. So option four, this is probably the most readable out of all of them. Hopefully it's very readable, but again, just very uh, um, very plain text on a black background with white font. The other thing to consider too is the use of sans serif font, which really means um, without without like the little end tags on it. And so serif fonts, such as Times New Roman, are great for reading on a physical piece of paper, but sans serif fonts are great for reading on a screen. So what are some of the principles of readability which we've already addressed? It's ensuring proper spelling, ensuring proper grammar, word choice, and syntax. So that's just checking your spelling, checking what words you're using, checking to make sure that you have the right syntax in terms of verbs or in terms of adjectives, that things are following the right present tense or past tense or future tense, things like that. Also making sure that we don't use color alone to convey meaning. Um, uh, we can use some color as we think about designing some of our materials, but we don't want to say everything in purple is due the following day and then have things on a schedule that's written down in purple, right? So we want some other way to identify meaning to the learner besides color. Also think about how much white space is around your text. And that's helpful just in terms of a visualization for the eye. Making sure that we use heading styles and that they're in the proper reading order. We also want to look at our font style and size being appropriate. We also want to make sure our text is in some sort of contrasting color. And then, like I said before, sans serif fonts are used for digital media. So I wanted to take you through two brief videos. The first is a man who has visual impairment, and it's showing him navigating through a website and the importance of heading styles and what he ends up finding. So it's about a 3.5 minute video. So we're going to go ahead and watch that now. Hopefully you all can hear my audio.
Hi, my name is Jason Holt. I'm with the Universal Access Department. Today, we will be demonstrating.
Are you all able to hear my audio?
Yep.
Okay, awesome.
A screen reader. With a screen reader, I, as a blind person, can navigate to a web page, and I don't use a mouse because I can't see where the mouse is pointing, but I can use a keyboard, and JAWS, the screen reader, will tell me where I am on the page and allow me to read various parts of the page. Okay, let's take a few minutes to actually see how JAWS works. Here we are at my main screen on my computer, and I want to browse the internet, so I will open up a browser. I'll press the Windows key.
Menu, search box, edit, type text in this edit field or press up or down arrow.
And JAWS announced that I have a menu. Then I want to find my browser. My favorite browser is Firefox.
JAWS 17.0, one of Internet Explorer submenu, Word 2013 submenu, Firefox submenu
Oh,
406.
Firefox, that's the one I want, so I'll press enter.
Enter, leaving menus, Firefox, Mozilla Firefox, start page dash Mozilla Firefox, search clear.
That opens the browser. Now I'll press Alt-D to put my cursor in the navigation bar.
Alt-D, navigation toolbar, search.
Now let's go to our homepage, the community college's homepage. So I'll type SLCC
Period, E-D-U.
EDU. You notice that JAWS repeats to me each character as I type it. That way if I make a mistake, I can hear it and I can backspace,
Slash, U, HTTP://
and I can retype it again.
U, search your address edit combo, SLCC.
Now I'll press enter.
Enter. SLCC dash Mozilla Firefox, page has 3 regions, 8 headings and 68 links. SLCC.
Oh, it says SLCC. It sounds like I'm on the right page. Okay, here we are on our home page, and I want to go to the accessibility page, the college's accessibility page. I don't know where that is on this screen, so I'll do a search.
Virtual find, JAWS find dialog, find one colon edit combo.
I'm searching for accessibility.
A-C-C-E-S-S-I-P-L-I-T-Y. Enter. Visited link accessibility.
Oh, it tells me I'm now on the link that says accessibility. That's what I want, so I'll press enter on that link.
Enter. Accessibility visited link. Vertical bar SLCC dash Mozilla Firefox. Vertical bar SLCC list. Page has 3 regions, 1 heading and 69 links. List of 2 items, link SLCC slash accessibility.
Okay, I'm on the accessibility page. If I press H, which lets me jump from header to header,
Accessibility heading level 1.
heading, I'm sorry, not header. I'm at the accessibility heading. Let's read what it says under that.
List of 7 items.
Oh, there's a list of items.
Visited link home.
Home.
Link web accessibility.
Accessibility,
Link web accessibility.
web accessibility,
Link purchasing.
purchasing,
Link web accessibility. Link accessible documents.
accessible documents,
Link types of disabilities.
types of disability,
Visited link captioning.
captioning.
List end.
Now let's hear what the text says underneath the heading.
Web accessibility means that people with disabilities can use the web. More specifically, web accessibility means that people with disabilities can perceive, understand, navigate, and interact with the web, and that they can contribute to the web.
One thing you should know is that having a screen reader by itself does not make the internet accessible to me. If you look at our homepage, and as I navigate through it,
SLCC.
you'll find that there are headings
Summer classes heading level 2.
and
Content information.
regions which the designers have made some effort to put into the page that allow me to jump from section to section. So I don't have to
SLCC.
stop and explore every little link to find where I want to be. On some web pages where there might be almost 100 links, but yet there's no way to skip to the main part of this article that I want to read. So I have to skip from link to link to link and jump from section to section to find where I want to be, the main article. Sometimes it is frustrating, but after one has some experience with a screen reader, you learn some tricks.
All right, what did we think of that video? I think I was struck by how fast his screen reader read to him, and how like quickly he had to perceive information. What are your other thoughts about what you learned from that video?
That struck me too, Jason. And it's funny because I'd taken a course in assistive technology, and he might have actually even had that slowed down.
Okay.
It's insane how fast it happens. And there was some kind of study that I read about how quickly people who use screen readers do perceive that information, and their sense of comprehension through verbal communication is so much faster than you or I would be.
Yeah. And then I think I was struck too in that he searched for the content that he wanted to find, right? And so we often search for content as well, but we're able to visually see the various aspects in which we're looking for. So for him, it was just searching for a specific phrase immediately. That's all he did. And then also him talking about, if you don't have the proper heading structure, you have to go line by line by line by line to find the resource that you want. So,
Right.
other thoughts about the video?
Yeah, I had a similar thought, just how important your organization is, using appropriate headers that are, representative, right, of
Yep.
what's actually on that page, or, that part of the document, whatever it may be,
Mhm.
just to help with their navigation.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. Any other thoughts about the video that struck you?
One thing that struck me was that he didn't use the search bar to search the whole website. He was searching for words that were on that page. And I'm sure he could have used the search feature on the website, but it was much faster for him to do that. And we always are thinking like, well, what's the most important thing to put on this page, and what words should we use? And we don't want to overcrowd it with information. But then it struck me like, well, you need to have there's what is the important information so that people can quickly find what they're looking for.
Yeah, and then as we think about what's that key word, if we end up having some sort of graphic where maybe like that keyword is embedded inside of an image, then all of a sudden the screen reader can't read that word, right? It's a flat image to it, and it's just an image instead of headings and things like that. So yeah, that's helpful. All right. Next will be about maybe it's like a minute and a half video about contrasting color. And so this comes from UNC Chapel Hill, and it's a helpful video that demonstrates some of the contrast color issues that could arise. That's good. Watch that.
As you create digital learning content or build a course, consider whether or not the color choices you've made will help make your content easy for your students to read. In this video, we'll take a look at options for color contrast and how to effectively emphasize text. The use of good color contrast makes text easier to see. When considering contrast, compare the background color with the text color. A poor contrast between the two can make the content difficult to read, but pairing a dark color and a light color often works well. For example, this document has a white background, so I'll use the default font color black to type text. But I could also use another color such as dark purple or perhaps brown. There's many colors that provide great contrast against a white background, but I'll stick with the default to make the document appear professional. Let's see how this works in a presentation. This slide has a dark background, but the text is also dark. These colors don't provide very good contrast, so I'll change the font color to white. Difficulties can also arise when a pattern or gradient is used as a background. Ideally, the background should be a solid color. It's important to note that some people have color vision deficiency or color blindness, which affects how they perceive color. To them, red, green, or blue may appear muted or appear as another color altogether. So we'll need to avoid certain color combinations, such as red and black, green and blue, or red and green. We'll also make sure that we haven't used color alone to convey meaning such as emphasis. In my document, there's an important sentence that I want to make sure stands out, so I'll format it in red, but I'll also need to make it stand out in a way that doesn't rely on the red. So I'll also apply the bold font variation. There we go. One last thing I'll check for is whether or not large amounts of text have been underlined. Underlining is usually reserved for hyperlinks, and we'll also want to make sure that bold and italics are used sparingly. So I'll have this block of text stand out by highlighting it and adjusting the margins a bit. That looks good. Taking a few minutes to make sure you've made accessible color selections will help ensure that color won't be a barrier for anyone reading your content.
All right. So I thought that was a helpful video, just to give some color contrast samples that make or that work well, and then to even show what happens when you create a PowerPoint and you have a dark background with dark text. Are there other thoughts about that video that was helpful, or in which you have questions about?
I just have a comment, I guess. And it's interesting. I've done a session on the Microsoft accessibility. So if you're interested in this, you can check out one of those recordings. But it's something that I found in kind of like the themes in Microsoft, where they will like change, sometimes it's like gradient colors for different items. And it's interesting because the text, usually it's like one color text, it's white text, and it's okay on some of the items that are darker in gradient, but it's not okay on others. And so I find I have to like manually go through and see like, oh, this is white text and it's a light green background, even though something else on the page is like a dark blue background.
Yeah, so it's that. So there's a built-in concern there, I guess. Right?
Yeah. And so it's that kind of manual step to go through and check and make sure it's accessible.
Yeah, and I see people use like gradients all the time as well, right? And it's like, maybe not. Maybe don't use like those like type of gradients and stuff. Other thoughts about this video? Okay, that's great. All right, so that was the first one. There is one resource that I did want to mention here, and this is the WebAIM Web Accessibility for Designers. It's not just meant for designers; it's meant for anybody who's really creating content online. And so, hopefully, y'all can see this. It's a little small, but it has some of the great principles that make sure that there's a logical heading structure, there's logical reading order, that like there's a good contrast, adequate font size, the right text. We talked about links, being sure to underline those links, or being sure that links are only underlined, that underlining is only used for navigational purposes. And there's some other helpful information on here as well. But this is a great resource, and I will provide access to these resources as well. But this is a nice infographic that you can certainly print out and hang up somewhere. And just as you start to design things, this may prove useful. A couple other things. There's this color contrast checker. That's a great resource as well, just to make sure that if you are designing things that like the contrast is okay. And then these are some of the Quality Matters resources as well. And I'll be sure to give you those links out as well. All right, so are we ready to go into the Nintendo mode? It's not really Nintendo. So this is Quality Matters Specific Review Standard 8.5, and this is about course multimedia facilitating ease of use. So when we talk about the word multimedia, we should probably define it. So what is multimedia? It's really just multiple forms of media combined into one delivery method. So this could be video, this could be PowerPoint with some sort of audio representative, or some sort of audio component on it. And it's used as a vehicle for content or for feedback, so images, audio, animation, video, interactive components. And we want to make sure that it's easy to use, that it's intelligible, and it's interoperable across various devices. So that's really the definition for multimedia. As we think about designing multimedia, one of the big things we end up doing is maybe putting text and and an image together. That's what I see most often. I do see videos from time to time as well. But I wanted to show you what could this look like. Sometimes this is what we find, and I'm sure you all have seen different examples of it. So we've got two different options here to explore together. So we're just going to walk through it together, and it's going to be the same content. And this comes from an open educational resource. So we're going to learn a little bit about the 1860s together. So again, as we think about multimedia, we want to make sure that like the graphics and some of the animations are used to enhance instructional materials. We don't want things to be distracting. We want to have things clearly represented. We also want to make sure font color, size color, things like that are easy to read. So this is combining some of the principles that we just talked about in terms of readability as well. So this is option one. So we have Abraham Lincoln, he's rotating in. So this is about the presidential election of 1860 and some of that conflict that happened between the North and the South, and how his election really began a chain of events. And so as we think about this resource, we certainly have some hyperlinks here. But as we select those hyperlinks, we'll see what happens. So would you all say that this is easy to read? Is this difficult to read? Was it distracting?
Difficult to read.
Difficult to read because of the font colors and yep. And we also have an image and we're not really sure what the image is, right? Looks like a guy on a horse maybe. Okay, so these are helpful resources for the students if they're learning this material, but again, it's really hard to read. So we'll go and look at this at Fort Sumter as well. Is this a little bit easier to read? Still kind of difficult? How would you describe it?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely easier.
Mm-hmm.
The contrast is a bit better.
Mm-hmm. Now, it does take over the whole slide, though.
Yeah.
Right? So that could be an issue if somebody's trying to get out of it, so they have to click to close it. Okay, and then we'll look at Fort Pickens in Pensacola, and we have a nice little spin effect coming in. Well, maybe this is a little bit easier to read. It's kind of a darker image as well. But as you think about this first example, what are some things that you noticed right away?
I mean, I think like the movements are very distracting.
Okay.
You know?
Right. So they don't add anything to it, right? It's just right. You just have, you have this one that bounces in.
Yeah.
Right. And this reminds me of maybe 1998 or something like that, right? Where we were using stuff like that, and then this one does a nice rotate and spins, and then Other thoughts on it? Okay, so we can look at option 2. Again, this is the same material. And so if I was the student and I saw this, I'm going to click on this, right? So now we understand this is dealing about the like cessation of states away. And so we have like the Confederate States of America seal on here. And so it's a little bit easier to read. We talk about, like the President James Buchanan being in office during that time. So this is a lot easier to read, correct?
Yeah, that and the like the X in the corner, versus like the click to close. The
Right.
X is a little bit more of a recognizable symbol.
Right. And so, yep. Yeah, you're right. So that works well. And, kind of like you said, it's not like distracting like the other one, and it's just there, right? And it does take up the whole screen in some aspect. You have a little bit of a sliver of blue over there, but just the way it enters the screen, it appears to be on top. So you have a layer, right? But you do have like that, like close button. If we look at Fort Sumter, it's very similar, right? It's a lot easier to read. We can now, read about Fort Sumter. We can then see the image. We can see the sailboat there. We can see the thick walls, the high walls. We can talk about how, I think the walls were 50 feet high from 8 to 12 feet thick. And the student's just able to see the image a lot better. And they can actually read about Fort Sumter at that point. And then let's look at Fort Pickens. So it's a little bit smaller of an image. So perhaps the image wasn't the same resolution, but what we didn't do was try to stretch it to fit. We just left it in the original resolution. And now students can see Fort Pickens. They can also read about Fort Pickens as well. And again, we have the same consistency throughout. We have that small X which appears, and we have a similar theme to each of the pop-ups. So what are your thoughts about these two examples overall?
The second one no longer feels like an early 2000s pop-up ad.
Nice. Yeah, that's true. I mean, there is something nice about watching Abraham Lincoln, rotate in with the text and things like that. Not that I don't like it, but it's just a nice, it's nice and, soothing. Probably not. Other thoughts about it?
I mean, I think for both of them, right, they both use this kind of same front, right, where they are following, the different recommendations as far as the contrast of the black background, the white text, using the underline for the hyperlinks.
Right.
So that part's good.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Yeah, so I mean, having the thing spinning, while it's certainly fun, it looks fun, it doesn't really add, it actually distracts a lot from what's happening. So as we think about some of the principles of multimedia, again, we've already talked about some of these, making sure that if we're using graphics or we're using animations, that they're used to enhance the instructional materials, and that it's not distracting. So having things fly in, having things bounce or spin around, that's just more of a distraction. The other thing too is images are appropriately sized. So we didn't try to stretch the image out. We didn't try to make the image lose its resolution. Oftentimes we'll have images that are stretched one way just to fill the screen, and so things are out of proportion. Or you'll have images that are either cut off or they can't be viewed without having to scroll around in 4 different areas to view it. One thing that these two examples did not get into was the audio quality, but I think we're able to hear when the audio quality is not clear. Also when we think about using videos, making sure that they are broken up into a shorter segment. The other thing is when we think about doing some sort of presentation, we want movement to be controlled, reversed, paused, advanced, etc. So we want students to be able to pause and stop things, to be able to go back, to be able to go forward in the course of the materials. And then, of course, providing closed captioning or transcripts for videos or for audio files. Here's some helpful resources about this. So the WebAIM captions is a great resource. It deals with what are live closed captioning, what are transcripts, what are preloaded captions. And then they have a section 508 that talks about how do you create accessible video? How do you do accessible audio? How do you do accessible social media? So again, those are some great resources which I will provide to you. So that was 8.5, and so we're going to move on to the last section, which deals with 8.6. So a lesser known standard perhaps, and that's about vendor accessibility statements. So vendor accessibility statements are provided for all technologies required in the course. So you might be asking, why do this? And why should we have this? Well, as you think about implementing a new tool in your course, um, ensure that it's in compliance with various accessibility laws and with the best practices. This can signal to your learner that you take their success in the course seriously, no matter who they are as a learner. And so that they're able to access the tool, they're able to interact with it in such a way as all learners can. It also indicates that you support learners of a diverse background and skill set by vetting tools and then including those companies that have a commitment to accessibility. So what would be some of these tools? If you end up integrating some sort of third-party software into the learning management system, perhaps it's some sort of, like plagiarism software. Maybe you have some other like presentation software, or you have a web conferencing tool, polling, lecture capturing, media players, document sharing, thinking maybe like some sort of like Google Docs, social media tools, mobile applications, publisher materials. These are all examples of technologies that perhaps you've been incorporating but haven't realized that, oh, maybe I should really investigate what the accessibility statement for these companies are and how they're providing access to their platforms. So I will say here at Northampton, we do some of this work for you in terms of making sure that if there's a third-party software which is integrated with the LMS, that it's been vetted like appropriately. We also make sure that some of the web conferencing tools have accessibility statements as well. But as you think about other smaller tools, perhaps other smaller technologies, here are some of the questions you can ask as you're evaluating it. Can you use a keyboard to effectively operate the software? That seems like a basic thing, but we use a mouse pretty much all the time. And so as you watch the video of the guy navigating through his screen reader, he said, I don't have a mouse because I can't see where the icon is, right? So he has to use a keyboard. So ask that question. Can you use the software while running adaptive technology, such as a screen reader? Does the software have its own accessibility features to assist users? That's a big one. So as you're looking at it, saying, okay, what does this company or what does this software natively provide to users in terms of accessibility features? Are there when you think about like the controls for operating the system or operating the software, are they properly labeled? Are they described? That's kind of a big thing as well, especially if you're using a keyboard or a screen reader. You want to be able to have those controls labeled properly. As you think about images, are those associated with certain user actions consistent throughout the software? And so it's that like consistency throughout that like you're looking for. Are things labeled consistently? If you have an icon here, is that used the same throughout the software? Think about what would happen if you took away the color. Would it inhibit any of the software from operating? And do any elements blink or flash or move, or can they be disabled without affecting use? So those are just some helpful questions to think through as you look at different tools or different technologies as you teach online. So these are some of the resources. This is a great resource. This has a compiled list of vendor accessibility statements. You also have a LibGuide on accessibility, which is helpful. You can also email us if you have questions. And I see actually we have one question. Lauren, what is your question?
I have a comment, if you don't
Awesome.
mind.
Absolutely.
Related to accessibility. This actually came up this week of vendor accessibility statements. And so something I will say is it's really tempting to try the latest, greatest tool and even things outside of the box. I think COVID really made us try tools that we would never have tried for education. But most tools that are designed for education are at least aware that they should be accessible. They may or may not be there, but they're usually going to have some kind of statement. They're going to know what things are accessible, which things aren't. I'm working with a faculty member right now who started using a tool that was designed to make kind of interactive magazines, like flip books. And it looks really great and it's really fun and interesting, but it is completely inaccessible. And I contacted the vendor to say, do you have an accessibility statement? Does it work with screen readers? Am I just doing something wrong? And they responded to me just like, nope, it's not accessible. And
oh, wow.
yeah. and that was that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And because it's, it's not an educational tool, and so coming up with an alternate solution, and that in that case it was pretty easy, and I was able to work with the faculty just to make sure they had that information in a Word document as well. But it is not always a guarantee that a product is going to be accessible, especially if it's not a product meant for education.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yep. Thank you, Lauren. All right, I just posted in the chat the some of the resources which were mentioned here. So that that is the end of my presentation. So again, just a reminder about our Accessibility April month. All of these are housed, all of these have been recorded and are being housed on our YouTube channel. And so if you have an interest in any of these, please check those out. And then if you have an interest in our Accessibility April project, again, please check that out. Please email Lauren with more information. So that is it. So thank you so much for attending, and we'll stop the recording now.
Thank you.